Hey everyone, this is Jamie.
And Vicky. And before we get into this week's episode, we have a little bit of an announcement.
Yeah, I am going to go on parental leave, so I will be gone for a couple of weeks here from the podcast.
And obviously, we are so excited for Jamie to welcome a new family member. But in his absence, we will be potentially having some rotating co-hosts in the mix. You'll have a lot of me in the next coming of weeks
Yeah.
ahead. And can't wait for Jamie to return and hopefully have some new ideas of episodes for kids.
how to go hiking with a baby, how to do a long road trip with a baby,
An
all things,
infant.
an infant even, all things that I'll soon be figuring out. But don't worry, the pod is going to stay here. We're not going anywhere, and I'll be back before you know it.
For now, here is this week's episode.
Hello, hello. Welcome back to Peak Northwest, an outdoors and travel podcast by the Oregonian and Oregon Live, dedicated to the adventure and exploration of our beautiful Pacific Northwest. I'm Jamie Hale.
And I'm Vicky Connor. Together, we take you to some of the most beautiful and interesting destinations in our region, discussing where to go, what to do, and places to see. And today, we are testing our mettle on some of the very longest hikes on the Oregon coast.
That's right, Vicky. Midsummer usually means near peak form for Northwest hikers who, by this point in the season, have had the opportunity to maybe climb some mountains, tackle some backpacking trails, or complete any number of challenging routes across the region. And while some folks are quick to test their legs on big name hikes, like, say, the Timberline Trail or the Wildwood Trail or the Three Sisters Loop, there are also a ton of beautiful, pretty challenging hikes on the Oregon coast.
I am so excited to get into this because I've done challenging shorter hikes on the coast, but nothing that I can feel my legs about to fall off or anything like that.
There's definitely some ups and downs, but there's I think the thing about these coast hikes, like there's a lot of short hikes that people do, right?
Yeah.
But what I've noticed is that there's some of these parks and some of these areas that have a lot of interconnected short trails that you can jump in and do 1.5 miles here, a couple miles there, but it's really easy to string a bunch of them together and end up doing 10, 12, 15, 20, 25 miles in one area through a variety of really beautiful coastal ecosystems.
Yeah, I remember, and I think we're about to get into this, but I remember my trip down toward the Brookings area, seeing the Oregon Coast Trail
Mhm.
on some of the other viewpoints that I was going to would require me to go on a part of the Oregon Coast Trail. So I that was one that really stuck out to me as why have I never really heard much about this?
Well, yeah, I mean, the Oregon Coast Trail. So, for folks who don't know, is a long distance through hiking trail that runs the length of the Oregon coast, top to bottom. What makes it a bit different is that it's not all on trail. So, in order to complete the Oregon Coast Trail, you have to do a lot of walking on the side of Highway 101, which is like a little dicey, like not even like on a sidewalk, like there's no sidewalks on the side of Highway 101. It's like on the shoulder of the road. You have to like find your way across a lot of like bays and river mouths. So people who do it will sometimes charter vessels, or you got to flag down a fishing boat and be like, hey, can you take me across real quick? I'll give you, $20. So it's like not like hiking the PCT even, where like here's the trail, here's where I'm walking, here's where I'm camping. Finding places to camp is hard on that trail. So it's not like the most physically demanding long distance hiking trail, but it is super complicated and weird. So I don't consider this really it takes it takes the right kind of person to do that sort of thing. It's really cool if that's you, but I'm not one who likes to walk alongside the highway. So when I was looking at putting together this list, we've got 5 long distance hiking trails today. We're not talking about the Oregon Coast Trail. Nothing is going to make you walk alongside the highway. These are all places where you can find a trail map. It's easy to see. It is just pure hiking, if that makes
No
sense.
boats necessary.
No boats necessary.
Okay, so we have our list here and kind of going in order from shorter to longer. Where should we start?
Okay, let's start. Number 1 here is Cape Lookout. So this is a traverse throughout Cape Lookout State Park. So a lot of folks have been to Cape Lookout before. There's 3 trails there. There's a trail that goes out to the edge of Cape Lookout. That's called the Cape Trail. But then there's a trail going north to the campground, creatively called the North Trail. And there's another trail that kind of goes switchbacks through the forest down to South Beach, which is called the South Trail. Okay, so this sort of like this little 3-legged trail system at Cape Lookout. And each one of those trails is like, around 2 miles. So any one of those out and back, you're looking at like, 4 miles or so. But if you started, say, at the campground on the north side of the park, you could hike the North Trail, go out along the Cape and back, go down to the beach and back, and then hike back along the North Trail to the campground day use area. And that in and of itself would give you about 12.6 miles of hiking. So
Nice.
that's a long day, but that's like, relatively speaking, that's pretty doable. And it gets you, it gets you this nice beach. It gets you some really great views along Cape Lookout. And you can do it if you're camping there. You don't even have to worry about parking. But there's a day use area there you can park at and do this whole thing pretty easily. It's a very simple trail to do. I think 12.6, when we're talking about these hikes today, is very reasonable.
And you said this is mostly flat?
No.
Okay.
You have to hike up to the Cape, right? So the North Trail, when you begin this hike, it'll take you up to the Cape and then out along it, and then down the Cape, the other side, and then back up the Cape, and then back down it, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So there is some ups and downs. So it's going to definitely give you a little bit of a workout, but it's not like the hardest hike in the world. It's probably a good, solid, moderate hike.
How much is it like wooded versus views?
It's a lot of wooded, but it's one of these places where you can see kind of the ocean through the trees. So like hiking out along Cape Lookout, there's a lot of wooded area, but there's several viewpoints along the way. And of course, the view at the very end is spectacular. You get these huge, wide open views of the ocean. And then along South Beach, if I'm remembering my experience on that one, you can kind of see the ocean through the trees as you're hiking down through the forest, down the cliffs there. And then you get to go down into this beach. It's more of a secluded beach. Cape Lookout Beach is pretty popular. Campground's right there. South Beach, I believe there's a Boy Scout camp down there. But otherwise it's a pretty quiet beach, all things considered.
Yeah. Nice to know that the campground is there, because I think with any of these that we're going through, it's like if you're committing to this many miles, you're probably going to be a little bit tired. So if it can work out that you get that campsite, that would be quite nice.
Yeah. With each of these hikes, I'm going to add some options to sort of, adjust the mileage to your, capability. So if you're saying this sounds great, but 12 and a half is a little too much. So if you just cut off that South Beach section and say you're just going to go from the campground out to the end of the Cape and back, a really cool hike. Cutting out that South Beach segment takes this hike down to 9.2 miles, a bit more doable.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you're like 12.6, that's not enough. I want to do more hiking than that. If you when you get back to the campground or the north side of the park at the very end, if you keep hiking along the beach there, say the tide is good, you can hike all the way up to the end of Netart's Spit and back. And that will add an additional 11.2 miles if you're into that.
If you're looking to nearly double the mileage, go for it.
You want to do, 24 miles in a day, a lot of it along sand. Hey, that option is there for you. Some people love this sort of thing. So That wouldn't be my choice personally, but folks, you've got options here.
Have you done this one recently or part of this one recently?
I've done all three of those trails separately. Like I've gone to Cape Lookout and back, and then gone down to the beach. That's sort of the main one I've done, and then I've hiked the campground up to Cape Lookout to some degree at some point. I've not done the whole thing before, and I think that's true for a lot of these. I've done a lot of pieces of these, but this is mostly a list that, like, as I've done a couple pieces of these hikes, I've thought, boy, you could really add, another trail and make this a bigger adventure. So a
Right.
lot of this is sort of me dreaming up bigger adventures for myself, and now for all of you.
Awesome. So Cape Lookout could be 12.6, could be 20 something, whatever your heart desires, could be less.
Yeah,
I love
exactly.
that. Where are we off to next?
Okay, the second trail is the Fort to Sea Trail. This one is, I think, the simplest we have. This is just one trail. It leads from Fort Clatsop at the Lewis and Clark National Historical Park in Warrenton, and it goes out to Sunset Beach on the North Coast. So just out and back, it's 6.5 miles each way. So that gives you a 13-mile out and back hike. I love this hike. This is one I've done. You kind of you leave this like historic recreated fort site, and the idea is it's sort of like tracing the Lewis and Clark Discovery Corps from their winter camp out to the ocean. So it runs through the forest. It's a really nice, dense forest out there, and it kind of emerges into these like farmland areas, and eventually it goes underneath of the highway, and leads out to sort of these sort of like boggy wetland areas, um, and out eventually into like the sandy forest, and then out to the beach. So you're kind of gradually getting out of the forest into the beach. It's really a really cool place to hike.
Yeah.
Really different settings there. When I hiked it, I was like pretty much the only person I saw. I saw a little kid fishing in one of the little ponds, and he was like the only person I saw out there. So this is not one that a lot of people do. A lot of people will be at either end of that, like the historical park gets pretty popular and Sunset Beach gets pretty popular. But the hike between is much less so. I think because it's 13 miles, but it's I think a doable 13.
I love just like the different environment, the different kind of like terrain that you're going through. Because sometimes when you're just hiking through the woods, it's like, all right, same stuff, love it, but it can get a little monotonous. But yeah, going through that bog area and then out
Mm-hmm.
towards the beach and the woods, super cool.
Yeah, I remember I got out to the beach and I was like, it was a great place to rest at a halfway point. It's so nice to have a place to sit and rest when you're like just halfway done to the hike, and for that place to be like the ocean was an experience I had not had before. I think that's very cool. At the same time, I was like, man, I want to sit out here all day, but I was like, no, I got to get back. Um, I had people ask me before, like, can you go like one way? Can you go from like the fort to the beach and then get like an Uber back? And maybe, I don't know. It's not like Portland. There's not like Ubers everywhere and Lyfts everywhere in this part of the coast. If you have two cars, you can park one at either side and just do one way. That's a way to shorten it. Um, I think I'm just like maybe philosophically a little opposed to doing the double car shuttle at busy places, because you're taking up two parking spots at places where people are often struggling to find one. But if if you're on a weekday or something like that, where there's fewer people or off season, go for it. So a lot of ways you can try to cut this down shorter, but I tell people just do the 13. If you are able to hike that far and you have some time, like in these longer days, just go for it. It's really, really beautiful.
Sweet. All right. I think we're headed to Yachats next.
Yachats. Yeah. Okay. So the third hike is Yachats to Cape Perpetua. So this is another really, really cool hike. I like this spot quite a lot. So Yachats, we've talked about it before, on the Central Oregon coast. Beautiful town, great spot to hang out. You can walk from the south side of town at Yachats Ocean Road State Park. That connects to the Amanda Trail, which I believe you've talked about at some point in the past. But
Yeah.
it's a really cool trail. It's a collaboration between the local indigenous communities there, and the local non-indigenous community in Yachats coming together to sort of tell the story of the forced removal of indigenous peoples from the southern coast up to Yachats, where they were held for a number of years at a temporary reservation that was there. Really rough conditions, really sad story. The trail itself is now sort of a place of celebration. There's a statue on the Amanda Trail. It's the Amanda statue where people leave offerings. There's a little area to sit and contemplate. There's a beautiful new footbridge up there. So it's a really cool hike. So when you can take that Amanda Trail section from Yachats, about 3.7 miles, goes through past the Amanda statue and up onto the cliffs of Cape Perpetua. Really beautiful spot up there. So it's a little bit of a climb up there. It's nothing too crazy. It's all on trail. But you get these really incredible views from on top of Cape Perpetua there. It's just, there's like a stone shelter that you can get views of looking out of the ocean. It's so good. And that can be your hike, and that's pretty good. That's, that would be 7.4 miles in and of itself. Great hike. And that's the one that I've done before. I really enjoyed it. But if you want to add a little bit more, your feet aren't quite that tired yet, you can walk from Cape Perpetua. Now that you're in this sort of, I think it's a Cape Perpetua National Scenic Area, another 1.2 miles from that viewpoint down to the visitor center. And from the visitor center, there's a bunch of little like half mile to mile long trails out to the sort of the rocky coastline. So you can walk down to Thor's Well from there. You can walk down to Cook's Chasm. There's all kinds of these like, funny, dangerous sounding named features. There's tide pools. There's like, spouting horns. There's all kinds of cool stuff. And you can walk all around there. And I think that's like, a round trip doing all of that stuff beyond Cape Perpetua, looking at like, maybe an additional 5 miles or so, if that. But there's one more add-on that I would recommend if we're talking about just adding cool stuff on. You can also hike out to this thing called the Big Tree. I think it's just the Big Tree hike. I could use a better name probably, but it's this really, really cool big, I want to say it's a Sitka spruce. Ancient, and it's formed around a nurse log. So there's this big hole in the bottom of it that you can kind of crawl up into the underside of this tree. Which is super, super cool. And it's there in the campground. You can drive to it practically. So, you don't have to do this hike, but it's an extra 1.6 miles round trip to do this Big Tree. So all of that stuff, if you were to do all of those things from Yachats, the Amanda Trail, Cape Perpetua, all that cool stuff around there, looking at about 14 miles round trip.
Dang. This one, super cool that you can do and see that many things, whether you're crawling through a tree or just looking out to Thor's Well.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of highlights on this one.
So many. And another easy one, for folks who want options to cut this back a little bit, so many ways to do it, because there's like a ton of trailheads. These are all interconnected. So like we said, just doing the Amanda Trail is fine. You could just drive to the visitor center at Cape Perpetua and just go out there and do, Devil's Churn, Thor's Well, tide pools. And that's only like, I don't know, it's like maybe like 2.5 miles or so just to do those couple of things. And add the Big Tree, that's another, 1.5 miles. So you can make little pieces of this work. To make little hikes if you want. But I think this is just one of the cooler options to do a longer distance hike there. And Vicky, while we're talking about options, I should say this is another one where if you want to, you can add on even more mileage to this hike.
We doubling it again?
Well, yes. So Cape Perpetua has so many hiking trails, just truly so many. One we don't have on here is this like long distance, like wilderness forested hike. But if you're hiking around Big Tree, the visitor center, all that stuff, there is an additional loop called the Cooks Ridge and Gwynn Creek Loop. This would give you an extra 6.2 miles to your trip. So if you're doing that 14, that makes it a little over 20 miles. And there is an optional side trail that goes out to a viewpoint over the Coast Range in the middle of that loop. And that adds on an extra 3.8 miles. So we're talking about, adding on some quick math. That's 10, 24 miles, all
Oh
said
my
and done.
God.
If you want, if you want,
Yeah.
no pressure. But if you're someone who's like, I am looking for a 24-mile day to get myself ready, or just to like have, a dawn to dusk adventure,
Yeah.
Cape Perpetua is a great place to do it. Just saying.
Uh, I just like, for me, the thought right now, currently as is, I haven't been doing a ton of hiking this summer, but like the thought of 24 miles in a day is just like absolutely insane to me at the moment.
Some people
Um,
do it.
I know, and I give those people massive kudos. I'm currently in a place like 9, 10 miles. I'm like, ooh, this was
Yeah.
a good one. We are pushing it. But hey, get out there. All right. Shall we move on to our next one
Yeah.
here?
Yeah. Number 4 on the list is Ecola State Park. So another state park that people, I'm sure, they know, you've been to it maybe. This is the one just north of Cannon Beach. Beautiful spot, lots of places to hike. This is another one where there's several trailheads throughout the park. I think there's 3 or even 4 trailheads where you can jump in and out of this trail system that runs basically from Seaside all the way down almost to Cannon Beach. So this goes along Tillamook Head is the headland we're talking about. And Ecola is known for its cliffside trails, beautiful views. The Tillamook Rock Lighthouse is out there, which you can see from a viewpoint way off in the distance. Just so many, there's a couple beaches there that are great to go check out. There's just so many things to go and see there. So if you wanted to hike all of this, you could start at, I think, where a lot of people will start at, which is called Ecola Point. This is like sort of the first big parking lot you get to in the park. You go past like the park host, and you could kind of go to this big parking lot where you see like some great views. I think they've used that view in some movies before. I think maybe the Goonies
Mm-hmm.
did it, and it's a great spot to sort of start. And they had this trail that just opened a few years ago. It goes from Ecola Point to Indian Beach, which is sort of the next big trailhead parking lot. And that trail is 2.1 miles. And it's honestly a really great one. It's a good mix of like ocean views and like quiet forest. It winds around through the forest there and pops back out at Indian Beach. And it's just really, really nice trails. So that's one I recommend to anyone. Doing that out and back, 4.2 miles, easy. You can do it. That's a great hike. If you want to add more, though, if we're talking about long distance hikes, you can keep going from there, from Indian Beach up through the what's called the Clatsop Loop Trail. This is another classic day hike. It goes the loop. One side of the loop goes along the cliffs, and then you come back around, and it goes down through the forest.
Yeah.
That one's 2.5 miles, the whole loop. So really, really doable trail. Again, beautiful views. And once you get to the end of that trail, there's an optional side trail to go out to the Tillamook Rock Lighthouse viewpoint. So this is, if you want to do that, you can. And this is also where at that point, there's what's known as the hikers camp. These are like some rustic wooden shelters where people can technically sleep and stay the night. It's a little tricky because like you can't leave your car parked there overnight at the trailhead. So you have to like get dropped off to backpack up there and sleep in these shelters. It's also like, they're open shelters. So you're there with like, the mice and the rats and whatever else wanders in. It's like not romantic unless that is your idea of romance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Some people are like, oh, yeah. And some people like me are like, I don't know. A tent would be fine. So that is there. But it's not the end of things, because From there, from that hiker's camp, you can continue hiking north for an additional 4 miles on the Tillamook Head Trail, which takes you all the way up through this more rugged forest uh, area that where like the trail's a little harder to find. It can get really muddy in the winter. It's a little more rough and tumble. It takes you all the way up to a parking lot in Seaside, where you can park on the other side and do that whole thing backwards if you want. So there's all of that. And we kind of, at the beginning, we skipped this sort of southernmost trail. So from Ecola Point, you can do all of that north. But if instead you started at Ecola Point and headed south to Crescent Beach, that adds another 2.5 miles out and back. So all of that said and done, if my math is correct, and I hope it is, that you're looking at about 17.2 miles round trip to do the Crescent Beach add-on, to do just basically all the trails in Ecola. 17.2 miles, which is a lot. Yeah, that's still quite a lot.
That's a lot. Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah, the only part of this one that I've done is the Clatsop Loop trail. And which is one that's great if you're in town with visitors, you want to get just like a little taste of hiking on the coast. And then like, go into town and grab food or whatever. But can't say any of my visitors would want to do 17.2 miles.
No, it's a little crazy. I feel a little crazy researching and talking about it. Because it's so much. I mean, the Clatsop Loop Trail is great. Like you said, Vicky, perfect for visitors. Indian Beach Trail is another one that's really, really good. Recommend that for anyone. The Crescent Beach Trail is also good. A fun side note, Crescent Beach was just named one of the sexiest beaches in America by one of those weird trending sites that do like those, like, we did a study on blah, blah, blah. I don't think there's anything sexy about Crescent Beach. No knock on Crescent Beach. The last thing that Crescent Beach was in the news for before this story that we did was for a decomposing whale that washed up on shore. So like,
that doesn't scream sexy to you.
It's also like, I mean, if anyone's out there wearing like a bikini and rolling around in the surf, I'm concerned for them. That's crazy. Don't do that. That water's so cold. The wind's blowing. It's like 50 degrees. Like, come on.
Oh gosh.
Anyway,
maybe it was one of those studies that was like actually just trolling everyone.
Oh my god. So that said, Crescent Beach, a cool spot. You know, it is like an add-on you can do. You know, I think this is one where I've done all these pieces separately. The hike in from Seaside along that Tillamook Head Trail, that 4 miles, that's pretty good. It's a bit tougher. Just like it's an uneven ground. It takes some navigation. So that's one I don't recommend to everyone. But this whole area, no matter which piece of this you do, or if, hey, you decide to do the whole thing, you're going to get something really cool out of it no matter what.
Sweet. All right, let's continue to bump up this mileage, making a bit of a leap here. What can you tell me about Oswald West Traverse?
Okay, the last one we have on here, another state park that people know, love, Oswald West. This is, we're talking about the same area, kind of, in around Cannon Beach. I feel like when people go to Oswald West, they're talking about going to Short Sands Beach. Like, that's the place people go surfing. It's the place people know. And to go from one of the parking lots to Short Sands Beach is really quick and easy. It's like, I don't know, like a mile, if that. However, there are so many trails in Oswald West. It's a little ridiculous how much hiking you can do. So, Vicky, if you allow me to get a little insane about this again. I know I'm spitting out like a lot of names and numbers. I feel like I need like one of those bulletin boards with the yarn stretched across to make this all make sense. But
Detective
we're just basically
style.
We're going to start from south to north here. Okay. On the very far south side of this park is Neahkahnie Mountain. It is, a small-ish mountain on the coast. I don't have the exact measurements in front of me, but it's a beautiful spot. You can climb up there and see some really beautiful views. There's a trailhead on either side of it, but for the sake of this long distance hike, we're starting at the southern trailhead. So that takes you up to the top of Neocani Mountain and down back to Highway 101. Cross the highway, and you can go out to the Elk Flats Trail. Elk Flats Trail runs along the sort of the edge of the coastline. There's some really beautiful cliffs, a couple areas you can kind of break off and see some really honestly incredible views of the cliff line out there. A little bit of dangerous area, if you're so stay on the trail, certainly. But we're talking sort of about like, coastal meadow meets cliff, right? That kind of ecosystem. Elk Flats Trail to Short Sand Beach is just about 1.4 miles. So the whole Neocani traverse there is 3.3, then another 1.4 miles out to Short Sand Beach. From Short Sand Beach, again, this could be your endpoint. You could say this is a great beach, hang out, watch the surfers. It's very fun. Very nice place to stop. But from there, you can hike up to another cape in the park called Cape Falcon. Great views. I've done this hike. This is honestly a really cool hike. Just going from like the other parking lot where people usually park at out to Short Sand Beach up to Cape Falcon is a great hike. Really, really cool. But if you're going from Short Sand Beach up to Cape Falcon, it's another 2 miles. And then you can continue from Cape Falcon. This is a piece I've not done. It is quite a long hike up to Arch Cape, which is way far north of this area. So that one way, that Cape Falcon to Arch Cape, is 6.5 miles. So that adds significant mileage to this. So doing all of that, Neocani Mountain, Elk Flats, Short Sand Beach, Cape Falcon, Arch Cape, doing all of that and back is 26.4 miles.
Woo!
Yeah, that's a leg burner.
Oh my gosh, that's a marathon right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, are you up for this anytime soon?
No. No. I would do the Cape Falcon to Arch Cape and back. Yeah. Of course, Cape Falcon, you can't just start at Cape Falcon is the thing. You got to go from like, the closest park. Well, I guess you could start at Arch Cape and go down to Cape Falcon and back. That's the way to do it. Okay. If you're going to do that piece. But Neocani Mountain, highly recommend. Very beautiful. All these individual hikes are really, really good. Elk Flats, the Short Sand Beach, is a really nice little hike. That's a quieter one. People aren't on that as much. Short Sand Beach to Cape Falcon, incredible, like we said. So, I mean, you can break this up any number of ways.
Yeah. And there's no like backcountry camping though.
No.
Right?
Yeah. No, that's the thing. So if you're doing that whole thing, this is another one where like, okay, if you've got 2 cars, you could do a shuttle thing or have a friend go hang out and, eat some chowder and say, hey, come pick me up in, however many hours. Or, if you're a really quick hiker and you've got a lot of time, a lot of daylight, you can do this all in one day. It's doable, but it is certainly difficult. And that's what's true about a lot of these really, really long ones. So obviously, these are a lot of different kinds of options for different people. I think if you start at the beginning of this podcast, we're talking about Cape Lookout. The Fort to Sea Trail, honestly, is a good one to sort of test yourself on this. There's a lot of options to sort of build up to some of these longer hiking trails. But if you're someone who's hiked a lot of the coast and has done a lot of these shorter hikes and maybe like me is like, well, what happened if you just combine a couple of these? Some really easy ways to find some really long and interesting hikes out there.
Oh, amazing. Well, we just went through how many here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 6-ish. Maybe am I counting right?
5,
but 5, 6. I'm sure there are some that people are like, oh, what about this one? What about that one? Any other shout outs you want to give?
Yeah, I've got just a few shout outs for folks. If you're like, for some reason, you're like, oh, know about all these, done those. You're looking for more. Fort Stevens State Park, you can do a loop around that whole park for 10 miles. We were talking about that wilderness trail at Cape Perpetua. It's called Cummins Ridge. It's an out and back hike into the wilderness. It's 12 miles. It's all forest. If you're just looking for just forest, you can get that there. People like the Cascade Head Rainforest hike. It's kind of on the inside part of Cascade Head. I've not done this, but it's definitely at the top of my list. As soon as I read about it, I was like, oh, I have to do this.
Mm.
It just seems super cool. That's another 12.2 miles. And then you can walk the Astoria River Walk, basically just like the length of the river in Astoria. And that's 12.8 miles out and back. Very cool hike, it seems like. You get to go past, all the piers and under the bridge. It's
Is
more
that
sort of
a trail or is it like paved?
mostly paved. There is, I
Okay.
believe there's some trail portion at the very beginning of it. There's like some sort of like marshy areas. But this is mostly, hard surface walking. So not my favorite to do for that many miles. My feet don't like that kind of hard surface. But very cool spot for folks who are into that, and opens the door for more people who are looking, who have, mobility devices or strollers or wheelchairs like this. That paved trail offers you a little bit something more doable than these rugged hiking trails.
For sure. Could be a nice place to run as well if you're
Mm-hmm.
into
Yeah,
that
for
type
sure.
of thing. Amazing. Well, I feel like some of these shorter ones are more my speed at the moment, but lots of options out there if you're looking for a full day of being on your feet.
Yeah, Vicky, did anything jump out at you in this that you're like,
Um,
gotta check it
you
out?
know, I've been meaning to get out to Yachats, even when you mentioned like the Amanda Trail, several months ago when we talked about that. But yeah, all those highlights on through 14 miles, I feel like you can't beat that.
Yeah. Yeah. Super cool to see just so much stuff. And that's what I love about some of these hikes is the sheer variety that you can get. So head out there, folks, check it out. Take advantage of this last bit of summer light we have in good weather. Once we get to like January, February, that's not a good time to do these hikes.
Yeah.
You don't want to get caught in the dark, in the rain on Cape Perpetua. I speak from experience. I've done it before and it was not very fun.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I feel like this latter half of summer, I'm just trying to revel in every bit of sunshine that I can get my hands on.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's exactly right. Well, folks, that will do it for us for today. Until next time, you can watch our videos on the Oregonians YouTube channel and view all of our travel and outdoors coverage on OregonLive.com/travel, as well as HereIsOregon.com.
Please leave us a rating or review if you enjoyed the show. And if you want to support this podcast as well as our local journalism, please consider a subscription to Oregon Live. You can find details at OregonLive.com/pod support. Also, if you're a fan of the show and you're interested in potentially sponsoring it, you can get in touch with our marketing people at advertise@oregonian.com. This episode of the show is produced by me, Vicki Connor, alongside Jamie Hale.
Stay safe and happy travels, everyone. Until next time, we leave you with this 10 seconds of Zen.